Speaking of data, though, there was another big announcement, I guess, maybe on a different level, I suppose. But Zoho, a company we've talked to quite a bit, and I think you and I actually met at a Zoho event years ago.
Yes.
They have their, if you're not familiar with Zoho, they have an entire suite of 50 some odd, almost 60 now products.
Mhm.
And one of those products is a product called Zoho Analytics, which is their sort of answer for BI tools. Although I would argue especially with this latest release, they've become much more of a data platform as well.
Mhm.
And so they released version, I guess, 6.0. And in full disclosure, I have a report that is coming out on this sometime here in the next week or two. But what I love about the Zoho Analytics approach in general is that they're very, very focused on the democratization of taking something that in most organizations is limited. You got this data management function, and that's who has to manage all of this. And Zoho Analytics, I mean, Zoho focuses on more of the what I call the small to medium enterprise for this space. So smaller organizations without those resources, and they're really, really focused on making it simple and accessible. And with this release, they've continued to do that, and they've also now added all these AI elements to give a conversational layer for a bunch of pieces, and really kind of tying together the entire end-to-end data pipeline, which for a big company is something they've been able to do for a long time. For these smaller organizations, this has always been, out of reach, or at least a big stretch. And so I think this is again, in this whole idea that data is driving everything, a really important move for them.
Yeah, what I really liked about the Zoho Analytics 6 launch is that how wide-ranging it is. It's kind of hard to sometimes figure out, well, is going from 5 to 6 or 5 point whatever to 6 a really big deal? But in this case, when you look at all the stuff they put in, there's data management to figure out connectors and data prep, some advanced capabilities there. They already had data prep, but they put additional data quality capabilities there. They improved their analytics and visualization a little bit, but honestly, a lot of that is commoditized at this point. They put in Python IDE, so to help with data science, actually they put an entire machine learning data science studio in place for the data scientists. And then they also have their AI assistant. Zoho calls it Zia, which allows you to do natural language views of information and to get actual data back. So they're going all along the entire spectrum from data connector all the way to what we're looking at generative AI, and it's all in one package. And I think their most expensive seat is something like $500 a month. And when you compare that to how much a data science platform normally costs, where the pricing can easily be $50,000, $100,000 a year just to get in the door, the price difference is obvious. Doing this for $6,000 a year means that now any company can legitimately get a full package that goes all the way from data management to data science and Gen AI. You can literally have your data scientists start working in Zoho, which I think is a massive cost advantage, if nothing else. That's the one thing that sticks to me, that we're talking about 5x to 10x reduction, basically a 10x, 1/10 of the cost of what it used to be.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, it's like it's not a fair comparison by design, because one of the big things I think that Zoho, and that's why I'm calling them a data. We have this argument when I brief with them, that I don't like the term analytics, because it conjures a very narrow sort of view, and they actually, to your point, it's much broader. The whole data prep and data management, and I mean the entire thing. And they are truly an end to end. I mean, the entire data pipeline, all the way through the data science components, can be managed in their platform. And that's actually really hard to do, especially as you're dealing with bigger environments where you now need sort of this next layer of complexity and scalability that you really don't need when you're talking about maybe a smaller enterprise organization. And so they're able to sort of kind of bring it to that level. And we talked previously about democratization. And it's really interesting. Clearly, they have the studio that is designed for data scientists, But I would argue they're definitely making a play for this idea of the citizen data scientist. And unlike the unfettered thing we were just talking about, where you just have this wild, wild west, where you just have Joe Blow user out there doing it, this is still designed for somebody who understands data architecture, who understands the building blocks of what they're trying to achieve from a business perspective. And now they're giving tools where they don't have to actually become a Python expert to do this, or as they develop those Python schools in the code studio or skills in the code studio, they can start doing some of it. So I thought it was just really interesting. And the last little thing that I was sort of harping on them about is that one of the things that I don't think they, Zoho, are talking nearly enough about is that all of this agentic AI, all of these different forms of AI that we're talking about unleashing in the enterprise, they all are reliant on having a really robust data architecture that you can trust, data that you can trust at its core. And that's the blocking and tackling that Zoho Analytics is going to help its customers do with this tool. And so the pathway to AI are things like this. And they're not talking about, in my opinion, that enough. But I think it's a really solid release. And if I kind of compare and contrast to what we're hearing from the Salesforces of the world, right? You have the way up here, that's great. But if you're a $800 million company that looks at that and goes, well, that's all really big and really expensive and really complex, what do I do? I think Zoho Analytics suddenly becomes a very viable option.
Yeah, and I also think that when you look at the legacy analytics players like SAS or MicroStrategy or TIBCO, when you if you're using one of those and you're locked into this multi-million-dollar contract, you have to at least start looking at something like Zoho and think, wow, I could cut my software costs by literally 90% and still get the exact same capabilities that I'm probably using most of this for. I'm probably the one exception would be TIBCO has really great logs and real-time data that Zoho hasn't quite figured out yet. But with just about everything else, where if you've already got predictive analytics and reporting and data science and uh, and an AI assistant from this vendor that you can work with, and you might already be using their CRM or some of their finance or other software capabilities, it seems like a no-brainer to at least try it out.
Yeah, absolutely.